My name is Margaret Ellison, and I was 66 the year I gave up my house. I had lived there for more than 3 decades. It was a small two-bedroom with creaky wooden floors and sun-warmed windows in the afternoons. I knew the sounds it made at night, the sigh of the stairs, the hum of the radiator, the soft groan of old walls remembering. It was a quiet house tucked at the end of a quiet street filled with quiet things. And I had loved it in the way you love something that has held your life through both storms and stillness. But after my husband, Michael, passed away, the silence deepened. At first, I told myself I was fine. I kept my routines. I had tea every morning at 7:30 sharp, read the paper with a blanket tucked around my knees, and spent the afternoons pruning the small herb garden Michael had planted in his final spring. But winters are long in New England. And loneliness, if left to stretch out too far, starts to feel like furniture. Permanent, heavy, always in the room with you even when no one else is. So when my son, David, and his wife, Claire, suggested I move in with them, I didn't say no. Not right away. It'll be easier, David said over the phone one afternoon. We've got the space. You'd have your own room, your own bathroom, everything. It doesn't make sense for you to live alone anymore, Mom. Claire's voice chimed in from the background. You'll still have your privacy. The kids would love having you here. I hesitated. There was something in her tone that felt rehearsed, too smooth. But I was tired of stairs, tired of shoveling snow. Tired of grocery runs that left me winded and achy. And more than that, I was tired of eating dinner in silence. So I said yes. Their house was beautiful, I'll give them that. Modern, crisp, open concept. It had gleaming hardwood floors that made every step echo, high ceilings, and white marble countertops that seemed to glow under the ceiling lights. The walls were painted in tones of ash and bone. No family portraits. No messy bulletin boards, no fridge magnets with crayon drawings or coupons. Everything had a place. Everything was in its place, and I felt like I didn't have one. They gave me the guest room on the first floor, which I appreciated, no stairs. It had a window that faced the backyard, a closet, a sleek armchair, and a bed with linens that smelled faintly of eucalyptus and starch. Claire showed me where the towels were, which mug was fine to use, where the extra soap was kept. There's a house system, she explained. A lot of it's automated lights, speakers, even the thermostat, it's all synced. If anything feels confusing, just let me know. She smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't move the eyes. The first few weeks passed gently. I made an effort to be helpful. I picked the kids up from school when I could. I cleaned without being asked. I did the dishes after dinner and folded laundry without leaving a trace. I was careful to never leave the living room in disarray, never leave the TV volume too loud, never touch the good hand towels in the guest bathroom. I tried to take up less space than my shadow, and I think I succeeded because no one ever complained. But no one ever said thank you either. There were moments I cherished. Like when my youngest granddaughter, Lily, snuck into my room at night holding her stuffed rabbit and whispering, "Can I sleep in here with you, Grammy?" Or when I made my old apple cinnamon bread and David, just for a second, closed his eyes the way he used to when he was 10 and said, "That smell. That's childhood." But most of the time I felt invisible, not excluded exactly, just managed. Claire always had a comment, always subtle, always sweet on the outside. "Hey Margaret, I noticed you used the wool towels for drying the dishes. I usually reserve those for glasses." Or just a heads up, the music system's sensitive. If you ask Alexa for something, the kids hear it upstairs too. I learned to apologize quickly and quietly. I learned to check before assuming. I learned to use my earbuds, to keep the tea kettle volume low, to never answer the landline. Being helpful was expected, being visible was not. One Wednesday morning in May, Claire knocked on my bedroom door. She was dressed in breezy linen, holding her iPad in one hand and a ceramic mug in the other. "We've got some exciting news," she said with a brightness that made my stomach tighten before I even heard what came next. She stepped inside. "David and I are taking a little getaway," she said. "Just the two of us, Hawaii. We haven't had a vacation without the kids in years." I smiled automatically. "That sounds lovely. You both deserve it." Her smile widened. "And we thought, well, you're here and the kids are staying with my sister. Maybe you'd be willing to keep an eye on the house." "Of course," I said. "That's no trouble at all." "We trust you," she said softly, as if it were a compliment. She gestured toward the kitchen. I've stocked the fridge, left some ready-made meals. There's a bottle of wine on the counter for your quiet evenings. Her voice was gentle, polished, but something in me bristled, not fear, not irritation, something subtler, like the room had been cleaned a little too well. Like the air had been scrubbed of softness. Still, I nodded, thank you. They left the next morning. The children waved from the back seat of the car. David kissed me on the cheek and told me not to worry. Claire hugged me briefly and said, enjoy the quiet. I watched their car disappear down the street, and then I stood in the middle of their immaculate kitchen, listening to the hum of nothing. I glanced at the wine bottle on the counter. A deep burgundy, Merlot, beside it a note for your quiet evenings. Thank you for everything, Margaret. The handwriting was perfect, precise. The kind you see on wedding invitations. I opened the fridge, everything labeled, everything sealed. Every meal planned down to the vegetable portion. It didn't feel generous. It felt controlled. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in the armchair by the window. The silence was different this time, not peaceful, curated. As if the house was waiting for someone to walk through with a clipboard, I shook it off. The garden needed tending. The lavender needed pruning. The sun was warm and I had a straw hat I hadn't worn in years. So I stepped outside and tried, really tried, to believe I was alone. The garden was beautiful that morning. The air was mild, the sun warm but not too bright. Bees floated lazily among the lavender, and the rose bushes, which had been trimmed too precisely for my taste, were finally beginning to soften at the edges. I wore the wide-brimmed straw hat David had given me 2 birthdays ago. Claire had once called it quaint, with a smile that meant something else entirely. But today there was no one to judge. No one to raise an eyebrow or gently suggest a better aesthetic. I dug my hands into the dirt. I hummed softly. I let my knees rest in the soil and didn't care that it left stains. For the first time since I moved in, I felt the shape of myself again, unfiltered, uncorrected. After an hour or two, I returned inside. I wiped my shoes before stepping onto the shining floors, a habit now. I moved lightly through the kitchen, filled the kettle, chose a lemon ginger tea bag from the neatly labeled tin, and reached for the one mug in the cupboard that had a chip on the rim. All the others were too perfect, too identical. Like showroom pieces, that mug felt human. I drank slowly by the kitchen window, watching birds hop across the stone patio. The house was silent, almost too silent. I didn't know it yet, but that would be the last peaceful cup of tea I'd have in that house. That night, I went to bed early. The quiet felt heavy, not restful. I tucked myself under the comforter, turned off the lamp, and let the shadows settle around me. And then I saw it. A tiny red light, blinking, faint, rhythmic, persistent. At first I thought it was part of the smoke alarm, but it was too small, and it blinked in a pattern, not the steady glow of a safety device, but something else. I stared at it, my chest tightened. I had worked in public schools for 30 years. I knew what surveillance looked like. I'd watched enough seminars on privacy and digital monitoring to recognize the design, the placement, the angle. This was a camera in the ceiling, in the guest room, watching me. I lay there frozen, my eyes fixed on that blinking light as though it might blink back. It wasn't fear I felt, not exactly. It was something deeper, sharper. Like betrayal and violation wrapped in velvet. I stayed still for hours, the comforter pulled up to my chin, listening to my heartbeat echo in the room that was no longer mine, if it ever had been. In the morning, I told myself I was imagining things, that it was just paranoia, just an old woman being overly sensitive. I needed air. I left the house and walked to the small park at the end of the street. I bought a croissant from the corner bakery. I sat on a bench and watched a mother teach her child how to ride a bike. There, I let myself forget. But the moment I stepped back into the house, the feeling returned. The silence wasn't natural. It was waiting. I noticed the soft click when I stepped into the laundry room. I noticed the hallway light turning on automatically, even in daylight. I remembered something Claire said offhand a few weeks earlier. We love our smart home. Honestly, it listens better than the kids. At the time, I had laughed politely. Now it chilled me. That night, I stood under the blinking light again, and I made a decision. I pulled a chair to the center of the room, climbed up, and looked closely. There it was. A pinhole lens, barely visible, tucked into the casing of what looked like a smoke alarm. But it wasn't. It was a camera, hidden, discreet, purposeful. It hadn't been turned off while they were away. And I began to wonder, had it ever been off? I stepped down, my fingers trembling, my heart thudding. This wasn't about security. This wasn't about safety. This was surveillance. And it wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. I began to wonder how long they had been recording me, how many moments they had captured, how many parts of my quiet, invisible life had been cataloged without my knowing. And then I wondered why. The next day I started searching. Not for confrontation, not yet, but for answers. I moved through the house like a ghost, dusting shelves I had never touched before, looking behind picture frames, examining devices. In the kitchen, a timer mounted above the fridge had a small black lens, almost indistinguishable unless you knew what to look for. In the hallway, the thermostat had a sleek, glass-like face. In the corner, another black dot. In the laundry room, a device on the top shelf blinked once when I turned on the light. I began writing it all down. Each room, each angle, each blinking eye. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was awake. Then I remembered the office upstairs. Claire's freelance space. Always locked, always off limits. She once said, "It's where I keep sensitive materials." But that day, the door gave way, I stepped inside, and everything changed. The office smelled like dust and silence. Unlike the rest of the house, sterile, polished, curated, this room felt alive. Not warm, not welcoming, but busy. Cables sprawled across the floor like ivy. Labeled boxes lined the shelves. Stacks of neatly arranged tech components blinked and hummed with mechanical heartbeats. I had never been in this room before. Claire always said it was messy, that she needed her space to focus. But messy was not the word I would have used. It was engineered, purposeful. A room for watching, not living. On the desk was a monitor, a small control console, and an open laptop. No password prompt. Just the desktop screen, calm, idle, displaying a photo of David and the kids on a hiking trail. I sat down. My hands were steady. I clicked open a folder on the desktop labeled simply footage. Inside were dozens, no, hundreds of files, each named by date and room. Kitchen 2024 to 4 to 16. Living room 2024 to 4 to 18. Guest room 2024 to 4 to 21. Guest room 2024 to 5 to 1. I started cooking again, recipes I loved. Sometimes I ate standing. Sometimes I lit a candle. Sometimes I had dessert first. No one corrected me, no one watched, no one recorded my joy, and that made it sacred. Some nights memories returned. I'd walk past a mirror and just for a second expect to see a red blinking light above my head. I'd remember Claire's voice laughing on video calls, turning my quiet grief into content. But the memories didn't sting anymore. They clarified. They reminded me why I would never go back to invisibility. They reminded me how far I had come. I wrote a letter to myself on the first day of October. I taped it on the back of the pantry door where no one else would ever see it. It read, "You are not just the woman who left, you are the woman who saw through the silence," and decided she would never shrink again. One afternoon, I took a walk through the wooded path behind the cottage. The trees were turning gold and crimson. The ground was soft with leaves. The wind made no announcements, only whispers. I found a large flat rock warm in the sun. I sat. I closed my eyes. And I listened, not for someone else's voice, not for instructions or permissions or praise. I listened to my own breath. Steady, unashamed, whole. If you had told me a year ago that I would be here, alone but never lonely, without apology or performance, I wouldn't have believed you. Back then, I thought being allowed into someone's house meant I had been given a home. But now I know better. Trust isn't something offered in smiles and spare bedrooms. Trust is a silence you don't have to earn, a room you can breathe in, a life you don't have to explain. They invited me in with warmth in their voices and surveillance in their walls. They told me I was family, then studied me like I was furniture that creaked too loudly. But I am not a vase on a shelf. I am not a whisper in someone else's narrative. I am a woman who raised a son, loved a husband, built a career, and outlived the version of herself who thought she needed to be tolerated. And now I am home. If you've ever stayed silent because you were afraid of being called ungrateful, if you've ever felt observed when you just wanted to be seen, if you've ever folded yourself smaller to fit inside someone else's expectations, please remember this. You are not hard to love, you are not too much, you are not a guest in your own life, you are not behind, you are becoming. And the life that's waiting